Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm back. This is part two of Patricia Okoumou being convicted for protesting against Trump's zero policy on immigration, or zero tolerance policy on immigration. So, Statue of Liberty climber Patricia Okoumou is convicted for protesting Trump. The U.S. attorney said that she put people at grave risk. And so I had did one video and the video didn't come all the way out. So it says Tarisha, um, um, Doris, Patricia Okoumou got a slow clap around the world when she scaled the Statue of Liberty on the 4th of July in a now famous photo that she sat with her legs crossed at the base of the Lady Liberty while the police rescuer was just a few feet away from her. And so you can see her pictured here. And so Okoumou was there for approximately 2 hours before she was apprehended. The 44-year-old was protesting Trump's racist immigrant policy, which included the separation policy that has kept thousands of children detained apart from their parents. So the Congo native, who now resides in New York, Staten Island, on Monday was found guilty of multiple misdemeanors, according to the PIX 11. She was found guilty of 3 misdemeanor charges: trespassing, disorderly conduct, and interfering with government functions. So she was scheduled to be sentenced March the 5th, 2019, and faces up to 6 months in jail for each charge. So the act of climbing the base of the Statue of Liberty went well beyond peaceable protest, a right we certainly respect. It was a crime that put people at grave risks. U.S. Attorney Geoffrey S. Burnham said during a press conference on Monday. Okoumou seemed optimistic, if not resolute, following being found guilty. I'm hoping that this is an opportunity for me not only to talk to the judge, but the whole world, as I did on the 4th of July, to remind everyone that we have children in cages, and there are still a lot of children in cages. And she said at the press conference on Monday, no child belongs in a cage, period. And so L.A. Kaufman, breaking. Patricia Okoumou was convicted today of all charges in federal court for climbing the Statue of Liberty on the 4th of July protest to detention to protest against the detention centers of immigrant children. Here, she speaks to supporters outside the courthouse, and she will be sentenced on March the 5th. And so that's pretty much this article right here, and this is a video.
It's up to us to stand up, as I did on the 4th of July, to do what by our future, because our children are watching, our children are listening, and the world is laughing at us. Enough of that embarrassment. This administration, shame on you. And please, we're here to demand that you cease separating families at the border, that you cease calling asylum seekers criminals, because we know from the bottom of our heart, from the U.S. law, these are criminals. These are people rightfully seeking status, just like our ancestors did.
And so it cuts it off. And so it did that with the other video that I had previously played. And so I guess I'll leave it on this picture right here. I don't know if this will come out clear or not. Hopefully it does, but I had voiced some opinions earlier and it was cut off, and so I'm gonna go back into that. Hopefully it won't cut off. But what I was saying is there has been a lot of tension between the Hispanic community and the Black community, and I think it dates back from maybe the 80s or maybe even further back. But I said that I felt that it was more had to do with two groups and other groups as well who have been long oppressed, groups who have faced a lot of racism or a lot of oppression in terms of um, um, mainstream people who are in America, who are in power, or whom are in power, who pretty much hold the cards or they hold the control over others. Or they tend to dominate others based on either race or based on class or based on wealth. And so I feel like it's a fight for resources. And what I was saying in my previous video, I feel like a lot of times what has happened to Black people in America, they have faced a lot of racism. They faced a lot of opposition from other groups that come here who might have a little bit of more of an advantage if it's having more skills or having more money or having opportunities to get more money because of maybe the race of the person, because they happen to not be black. They could be a person of color, but they might maybe have a percentage of white or Caucasian ancestry. Seems that, or they can pass for white, or they have white class status. And there was also a fight for that as well. From what as I recall, someone had said that someone had went to court and on behalf of people who are in the Hispanic community who can claim white status, that they can, on the census, they can actually, even on applications, they can claim white status. And so, what does that do to one oppressed group to another oppressed group? Says that this oppressed group or this group whom has dealt with some level of racism, now you can claim somewhat of a white status. And so that makes that group feel as though that they might have a little bit more of a leverage or superiority over another group that has been long or for centuries oppressed or mistreated or treated in harsh ways due to racism. And so that's what's happened. There's a fight for resources. So I said here, even in the Los Angeles area, there had been tensions. Now, this doesn't happen with everyone. Everyone, it's not to say that everyone is bad, but there has, however, been people who will use to their advantage the fact that they can pass for white, or the fact that they have more money, or they're went to a different school, maybe they had higher learning of education or a different skill set, or they're able to achieve things at more faster pace, or they have more opportunities granted to them for based on whatever reason over another group has been here for many years, maybe even decades, and has not had those opportunities. And so it creates a friction between people of different backgrounds, even if they're people of color, and they all tend to have some similarities in terms of historical racism and oppression. And so the thing that has happened even in California, where people will fight for resources like houses, maybe good schooling, good education, notoriety, I guess, to have some kind of class or status or place in the world. And so that's what I said, that I feel like that a lot of this is this fighting or this competition or this level of hatred in terms of I'm better than you attitude is where it comes from. And a lot of Black community people have said that why is this woman, Patricia Okoumou, fighting this protest for people who have or shared such disdain and so much disrespect. And so there were comments that I read that really pointed out the disrespect that the very people that she was fighting for are not fighting for her on her behalf. They're not as in support of her as you would think they would be. And so it's not a surprise, especially for people that are of the Black community that are here, especially in California, that have dealt with this, that know where this is coming from, that, you know, even though her efforts are noble and well, even though she's probably a kind person and she's looking at the well being of children per se, it's not so much the color of the skin or the race of or the class of the child. It's a child, for Christ's sake. We should fight for all children, and that is good. Nobody's saying anything against that. The the problem that people have is that the very adults whom are probably from the same background as these kids that are being incarcerated or wrongfully put in cages for no fault of their own. Some of the very people don't have much respect for this woman here because of her being African descent or African race. And so it's sad. And so that's what the Black community was saying, who's fighting for her, are people like us. And so that's where a lot of the disgruntledness and the confusion comes out of, is that this woman, they feel that she's fighting the wrong fight, fighting a good fight, but with the wrong group, because that same group doesn't show support for her and people like her. And so that's where that was coming from. And that's what I was saying. And basically, rewording or re-saying or retelling what some of the things that I've heard in other, like videos, people who have talked about when she originally had climbed the Statue of Liberty in Liberty Island, how they felt like she was really not doing the right thing in terms of the representation from who, what fight she should be fighting. And they say, they, as in, critics and people who have voiced their opinions about this, say that her nobles, her intentions are well, maybe her heart's in the right place, and we should be fighting for the rights of all kids. But the problem is that the very people that she's fighting for, a lot of times Black people here in California, I'll just say Los Angeles, for example, and not just Los Angeles, it's been neighboring cities, have faced a lot of racism and a lot of hatred from people coming from those places. And so a lot of it is fighting for resources, fighting for recognition, fighting for a lot of notoriety, fighting for just to be, accepted here in America. And here you got people who've been here for long periods of time who have had, a lot of opportunities that have pretty much not even been offered to them, or there there's been some obstacles or many obstacles that have kept Black people from progressing, and a lot of that has to do with just being Black. And so sometimes you'll have people who come from a different background and they come from a different country, and they can come to America, they can get a loan, they can get a house, they can get a new car, they can get in positions of power, and then the very people who have been here all their lives are left without a job, or they're not able to compete in the housing market. They're not able to advance in life financially. And it does something to you to where it creates so much friction between groups of people that they begin to splinter off, and it creates social divide. And so that is what has happened. And it has happened in cities, it's happened in other places too, I'm sure. It's not just in the urban cities as well. And so that is what the Black community has been disgruntled about. And so that they say this in regard to her fight, that her her spirit and her energy is great, but misguided in a direction of a group of people who show so much disrespect and so much disdain just based on the woman for whom she is. And so it's sad. And a lot of Black people have been faced with some of that same hatred and some of that same racism, even in the workplace here in California. They've been faced with that. And so, you could have a lot of schooling, you could have education, but you're treated as though you have maybe, if not even that, high school level or lower. Like you're a low skill set. And then a lot of times you're also treated where you're ignored, you're not taken serious as a Black person. Sometimes you can have like degrees, It's not taken serious. It's looked like, oh, where did you get that? Did you make those up? Sometimes you're treated with such disrespect to where you're not even taken serious. You're not even given an opportunity to get in a position where you can lead others. So you're treated like an outsider, and then you're treated with a disrespect as though you're incompetent and you're unable to lead others because something's wrong with you, something's wrong with your race, and so, or your race of people. And so that is the way Black people are. There's been most Black people who have had that come at them, that type of behavior come at them from people from different backgrounds. And some of that has been the Hispanic community, who sometimes they might be a half Mexican or half white, or they might pass for white. They look lighter complexion. Even in their TV programming, they'll always put to the forefront the lighter or whiter skinned Hispanics. And, so we know where all that is coming from. So there's been a lot of frustrations, a lot of racial tensions, a lot of anger. And so with that comes competition. So a lot of it is crazy because it's silly, because if you look at the cities, like for example in California, Los Angeles, most of your lower income or median income cities, Blacks and Hispanics tend to live side by side and as neighbors. And so you would think, ironically, why would you fight? You're both in the same neighborhood. You've both kind of had some similar issues with racism and oppressions of different types. Of why would you fight? But it's for resources. And I feel like it's usually people in power or people who are higher up or wealthy, or they're self-absorbed, or they've distanced themselves from people that are of color. And so it tends to be those people. They live in the mountains or they live in the outskirts. They've lived this segregated life. They don't live amongst Blacks and Latinos. They tend to distance themselves. And so they have all these opinions about what Blacks and Latinos do. So when they don't have any friends, they just have a coworker they know. They don't have any close ties with anyone. Now, I'm not saying everybody is like this, but however, there are people that live a segregated lifestyle where they don't necessarily live amongst Blacks and Hispanics. They may work, or they may be the boss over Blacks and Hispanics, or they may have given, like a raise to somebody, or they may know somebody in the workplace, but they don't have a neighbor that's Black, or even if they have a neighbor, they don't really socialize with them. Most of their friends are Caucasian, or they're something else, or they're wealthy people, whatever it is of that effect. And so they tend to live away from the very people, that um, usually end up having confrontation with one another because they're fighting for resources. And so that's what I said, that in the first video before it was cut short, that a lot of people, I believe, what it is a fight for resources and recognition and to be accepted in American society, because it's always told to us, you want to come here and you want to get a house and you want to get good education and have a beautiful family. And so people fight for those resources of recognition and to be, awarded those luxuries of society here in America. And then when something goes against you, different obstacles, if it's your race, or if it's your ethnic background or your language, or maybe you just don't have enough money or you don't have the education, those can sometimes be roadblocks or obstacles. Some of them can be overcome, and then some things you cannot overcome because it is you. It's a part of you, being Black or being Hispanic or being whatever you are. And those things you can never, it's not a thing of overcoming. That's who you are. And some people are accepting of people who are different and from different backgrounds, and others, while others aren't. And so that's what the big fight is. And so that, I believe, is the reason why there has been those tensions. It isn't so much as so much only solely the focus of race as it is to also having money. What I said in that first video, I was saying that got cut off is that you notice how a person, they don't have to be that attractive, but if they have a pocket full of money or they're wealthy, somehow they're in a class status of their own where they're attractive, and they're attractive because they have money. And it's funny how people will act when you gain a lot of money, they'll treat you one way, and if you don't have any money, they treat you a whole nother way, which is not positive. And so a lot of times, I know I've seen this where somebody could be like really poor and not have a lot. And then as soon as they come into money, all of a sudden they're the best thing out there, the hottest thing out there. And so we've seen this even with entertainers. And so this woman, Patricia Okoumou, she was found guilty on all her three charges. And so my question is, who's fighting for her? Who is fighting for her? This woman, she's an African woman. She comes from the Congo. It's like, it's so sad. This woman, and they're talking about, and some of the comments were so mean and so punitive, talking about give her more time and deport her. It was so rude and so mean. And so that's the reason why the black community voiced their opinion that they felt like this woman, even though her intentions and her heart was in the right place, and she is trying to fight for the rights of people who have been mistreated, that her direction or her energies should focus in other avenues where she won't be mistreated and there won't be that hatred and disdain, and as in because of her being a woman that is of an African ancestry. It's so sad that the very people this woman is trying to represent in a positive way don't feel the same way about her. And so that was what I was saying in the first video before it got cut off. But what are your thoughts and feedback on this? And it's so sad because this woman's going to spend some time in incarcerated for fighting for something she thought was a good cause and a just cause. And she feels even still to this day that she's on the right side of history, which she may well be. But it's so sad that the very people you think would have supported her, given her more support, would have looked at her in a more positive light than some of the comments that I read earlier. There were some comments that were really, really mean and that were totally against this woman. And a lot of it I feel was because of her being black and, a black lady. It's just sad. And so a lot of people here, especially African American people here in the States, they know where this hatred is coming from. And so it's even in school systems, the schools, there's a larger number of Hispanic students. And so I'm not saying all people are like this, but you do have some people who feel some type of way about black people and they feel like they're better and they feel like they're on top, or they feel because they're not, or they can claim a different status, that they have an advantage over another group that has been long oppressed. So what are your thoughts and feedback on this issue? I think it's really sad. I know where this lady was trying to go, but maybe from this experience, maybe what do you say? She'll learn. Maybe her fight should be in other ways, directed in other avenues, not only just for kids, but also look at your people. Look at some of your people, what they're fighting for, people like you, even in where she comes from, how they treat people. There's been fights in Africa, over land and things like that. And you have people coming over there doing things to those countries that are in Africa, and it's horrible. And so, what are your thoughts and feedback on this? It's just really sad, but this woman, they're treating her as if she's a criminal now. And so I'm going to leave this video. This was part two of the first one. So, with that being said, thanks for listening.